Hey everybody. Wasn't sure what to do with this one, or what to call this one, or I thought that whole series was done. I was done talking about it, but the reality is, here's the update. Um, I thought everything was over with. Apparently, there was still at least one more interaction to be had. Occurred yesterday. You know, um, where I quit smoking regularly. With cigarettes. I don't come out to the shop as often as I used to. I'll spend a little bit of time out here in the morning, on a weekday, usually, and then not come out again until after dinner. And, as usual, came out after dinner last night, and there was a box sitting on the table next to the door, with some items in it, and the rings. So I was like, I knew she had to have, been here. So, as courtesy, I did text her, hey, thank you for bringing this to me. Um, it's a shame I missed you because I have some stuff that I thought that you would want back too. Um, because during the whole silence, no contact phase, like I figured that was the end. Like we weren't exchanging nothing, so I wasn't even, considering it. So it kind of took me off guard. But again, courtesy, like hey, reciprocation. Just because I didn't get it before doesn't. I can't match energy. I can't. I refuse to lower myself. If you're not on par with me, then you get left behind. Um, I know that's very condescending, but I'm getting there. Anyway, so I shoot the text and I tell her she could have kept the rings because they don't mean nothing to me. You know, when I picked them out, it was us in mine, and that don't exist no more. So, and there's something else to that too, but we'll get there. Um, so I had text and I said, hey, and it was a short list. It was only a couple things, but I said this and this are here. So, um, if you want them back, I can set it up and do kind of similar exchange. And she texts back, hey, I'm home, which is a good hour drive away. I didn't know when she had dropped it off, if she was still in the area. Apparently, she had stopped really early. Um, Again, I don't come out here, for a big chunk of the day anymore. Um, and she said, if it was okay, set up another time. And of course, I'm not going to make you drive that distance twice in one day. Screw that. I understand. So I was like, fine, no problem. And to my surprise, a little while later, I get a text saying, hey, I'm coming. Okay. Uh, so I repackaged her stuff in the same. And honestly, I should have been more clear. Hindsight is what I had done was I took the box that she had left my stuff in and I repackaged her stuff and put it right back in there and sat it on the table. And I came in and I sat down because it was that time of the night for me to sit in the shop and relax. And I figured if she wanted to talk, she would knock on the door. And if she didn't, she would grab the stuff and go. And she did knock on the door, but only because she didn't realize that I had repackaged her stuff in the box. Like, she thought I had stuff in here. Um, so I still think that was just to put a foot in the door, though. An excuse to test the waters. She asked if I wanted to talk, and I stuck to my guns. What I had said, in our last text together, I said everything that I had to say, and it went deaf ears. So I'm not wasting any more breath. But if you want to talk, I'm not going to be a dick. I'll listen. I'm very proud of myself of how I conducted myself. There was a few times that I wanted to let that anger out. I wanted to be mean. And I didn't. And it's ironic because it was like coming to a head. That anger was coming to a head just like yesterday morning. So I really can't chalk it up to anything else but divine intervention. Like, God really stepped in and like put that hand on my shoulder, said, "Hey, we got this." There's just no other way to put it. But so she wanted to talk. So a little bit of banter back and forth. I'm not gonna expose all the details. It just there's no need to. I'll go over some of it. But one of the things in the discussion was one of the ways we started this conversation was her saying, like, me saying that I was surprised that she came back, 2 trips in one day. And her response was, "Oh, well, I've been starting to drive more, going to see my sister who, moved out of state and all that." She's like, "So driving doesn't bother me now." And, my immediate thought was, "Oh, good to know." That was one of your complaints. When I was driving 2 or 3 times back and forth a day for us to see each other, it was okay. You know, when my health started to fail and it was her turn to reciprocate, it became a problem. But another case of you can do it for everybody else, but just not for me. It's a problem to do it for me. Because again, that trip last night, that wasn't for me, that was for her. And I know that 100%. In the conversation, again, I wanted to say something then, but I didn't. Bit my tongue. She tried really hard to get me talking, when it came to story mode and just general pleasantries, catch up, the shallow shit, I was all in. No problem. But I was not going to sit there and open up and start explaining myself because I know that's one of her tactics. She gets me rambling and I'm talking and talking and talking and explaining myself, and I was not falling into that fucking trap again, ever. So when it came to, topics about us, it was short and to the point. I was very friendly, very, I wasn't mean and nasty. One of the discussions was about weather, and it would have been a great night for a fire. And she's like, "Well, you can. Like, how long does it take you to set it up?" I hadn't expected her to want to stay that long, but I was like, "All right, you want to have a powwow around the fire? I'm down with that. That's always been my thing. It's a great time to sit and talk." Um, our second date was doing that, and I think that was kind of part of the goal too, was to get that nostalgia, that reminiscing. And I'm not gonna lie, it was bittersweet. It was nice to feel it, like that again. But it wasn't the same, and I knew it never would be. And I was hoping, you know, just a scrap of genuine remorse, some accountability, and I got a couple, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But it was just that, it was just the words. It wasn't, and the one time that she added on further than the sorry was, I'm sorry. I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not in the right headspace at the moment, but it was along the lines of, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you. I was worried what you would say. And it's like, fucking really? That's supposed to help? That's supposed to help your case? Like, you did that shit to me on purpose to be selfish because you didn't have the fucking guts? And I'm supposed to accept that? I almost let go in that moment. I almost said, you know what? You can go now. I didn't. Because again, I knew better. You don't give them a reaction. And I did screw that up, but it was one of those, I didn't catch myself. But it was a correction. So again, I was probably mean with it, but I wasn't overly cruel. And I kept telling myself in my head, like, you're better than that. You don't have to be as cruel as she was. Those last couple talks. She did some nasty moves. She hit below the belt a few times. But I'm better than that. You know. Our last face to face before that was her telling me, how I wasn't measuring up, and how she hadn't, the whole 2 years thing and blah blah blah. Didn't end very well. And then within, like I said, a week after that, she couldn't even hide her contempt. Like, she was straight back to ignore, like straight ignoring me, like basically to my face. This time it was over text, but she did ignore me to my face that day too. You know, all I ever asked of her is, do not make me feel unseen, unheard, and that is all the fuck she ever did. I should have seen it for what it was a long time ago, but I didn't want to believe it. I had to have the blinders on. There was one point she tried to finish a sentence for me, and she was close, because I repeated through the night, through the conversation. Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a dick. But again, I was honest and I was firm. And I was starting to repeat myself, but I paused. And I said, I don't want. And then she repeated, you know, again, our last text conversation, when I said enough is enough, um, that I didn't want to be associate, I don't want to be friends. There's no need to. There's no point in it. I said, well, And I told her, I said, ironically, I said what I was going to say is, again, I don't want to be mean or a dick, but I was going to say, yes, I'm done being in the friend zone. Like, I basically, I spent the last 2 years in the friend zone like I was a friend with benefits, and I didn't even know it. Like, she was off doing whatever the fuck she wanted to do, and didn't matter. I wasn't even a consideration. But that was, the eyes were open. I saw it for what it was. And again, when she made the comment about, I guess I should go back to the beginning of this. It was all over a girls' trip. And a few months ago, she had come to me and said, "Hey, I have this opportunity. One of my coworkers invited me," and I'm thinking, "Oh, that's great." Um, and she starts telling me more. It's a cruise. I'm like, okay, and that's bringing up things with me. And I'm sitting there thinking of all the times. How many times has she sat there and said, "Hey, my ex put me through this. My ex put me through that. I need you to walk on eggshells when it comes to that." And I respected that. And it was her turn to fucking pony up. And she couldn't do it. Because I told her, I said, "Look, my ex, the one I was with before you, went on a girls' trip cruise, cheated on me. I forgave it, and it continued." And I said, "I'm not comfortable with this. Call it insecure, whatever. I need reassurances." And at the time, her answer was, "Okay, but I don't want to talk about it now because I still need to think about it myself." And I said, "Okay, I'm cool with that." Right? And the next time was a couple months after that. And she just like blurted out, like we weren't even talking about it. She said, "Oh, I decided I'm going to do that. I need to do it for myself, so I'm going to do it." And I went on this whole spiel, like, "Hey, like, I understand that. Like, I don't want to hold you back, but we still need to have a conversation." And she literally ignored me to my face, like I didn't say a fucking word. That was our last face to face before last night. That was how that went. The disrespect was never going to end. And I can't, I refuse to live like that. I'm not doing it. You know? And the sad thing is, I still don't think, I think the reason it was all half ass apologies, like she couldn't even, give an authentic apology, part of it is because, she genuinely wasn't sorry. Um, and secondly, is I genuinely don't think she realizes how bad it was, how far she took it. Because again, I said, "Hey, this is my past. This is what happened to me," and of course, she literally smiled at that when I told her that. When I recounted that story and said, like, "Look, if you do this, it's going to mess me up. So, can you like alleviate me in some way?" Again, I don't want to be controlling. I'm not saying no, you can't go, but I'm saying I'd rather you don't go until we have this conversation. And again, I was clear about that. I was. She can say it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. She made a conscientious, informed decision in everything, in every step of it. You know? So we left that one, and on the discussion, we left that one on the end of the discussion before she left on, "Hey, we're going to try and break the cycle because the cycle is, every time you want to go act like you're fucking single, you come to me and I say, 'Hey, I have a problem with it. Can we talk about it?' and you ghost me, go do whatever you want anyway, and then come back like nothing happened. We got to stop doing that. Take those two discussions. Literally, that is exactly how it played out. She recreated fucking everything. So rather, yeah, and again, the following week she couldn't even hide her contempt. Again, she ignored me. So I said, you know what? I'm done trying to talk to you. And until you are going to make it a genuine two-sided conversation, don't fucking bother me. And she, to her credit, she kept to that word. She didn't fucking say a word to me. Not a text, not a call, not a screw you, not a nothing. The next time we spoke, I had had a moment of weakness, and I was missing her, and I tried to call. And of course, I didn't get an answer, so I'm like, okay, cool. So again, this is, she went out of her way to make sure. She called me back to let me know she was on that fucking boat. That she just went ahead, like, didn't even bother to have the conversation. Like, she made damn sure I knew where she was, what she was doing, and who the fuck she was doing it with. Like, went out of her way to make sure. Again, that level of cruelty and disrespect was very uncalled for. I understand, since I've had my health issues, I've tried to let her off the hook a few times, and she says no. She don't want to let me go all the way. Like, it's time to shit or get off the pot. Like, if we're not doing this for serious to, like, really be somewhere, like, I had marriage in mind. She wasn't acting like it. Either step up or step aside. Let me be free. And I kept giving it chance after chance. But yeah, we had plans for our summer together. A couple day trips. The couple of the kids had graduation. Again, that was part of breaking the cycle. Like, hey, let's repair. Because the cycle in the past has affected the kids too. I want to make repairs to that. All that went up in smoke. She didn't give a fuck about that either. Made sure she went on her vacation though. Made sure she went and did what she wanted. Didn't do a single fucking thing to mend the relationship. Didn't do a single thing to make the repair or put a single, even an ounce of effort into saving it. Literally went out of her way to make sure she was doing everything to fucking sabotage it. I'll never forget that last text conversation. Well, again, before last night. Um, I told her, I said, don't, or I'm sorry, she said, she initiated, she said, we have a lot to talk about when I get back. And I said, no, we don't. I'm good. I got nothing left to say at this point because I told her before she left, if you leave like this, if this cycle repeats, I'm done. I was very clear. There was no mincing. I believe my exact words was "You will be dead to me" for leaving me like that again. I was very clear. I did not mince words. And again, she made the conscious choice not only to continue to do whatever the hell she wanted anyway, but also to make sure I knew about it. And I won't say how bad that effect was because I don't want to give her the satisfaction. But that almost ended very badly. That was, again, divine intervention by the grace of God. You know, that was a close call. Because, again, I trusted her, and she made me relive one of my worst memories. I asked for, some clarity, some affirmation, like, hey, I'm always affirming you. It's your turn. Make me feel a little better about this. That's all I'm asking. Again, I'm not being a tyrant. I just can. You're supposed to be my partner. You're supposed to give it shit how I feel about it. Can we have the conversation? Never happened. And she was finally willing after the fact. Well, guess what? Then it's too late. The damage was done. You already shattered that trust. And again, this is all in my head. But at some point, she was testing the waters in the conversation around the fire. And I think this is what, it was shortly after this that she went away, left. She used voice inflection like it was a question, but about me detaching, about me choosing to detach from her. And I snorted, like I couldn't hold it back. I snorted. And she's like, gee, thanks. I said, listen, I said, you did that. You made that choice. You disconnected us first. I only let go because I had to. You didn't give me a choice. She had nothing to say to that. And in all honesty, I mean, let's face it, how much has it been on my mind? Like, what could she, after that trust was shattered that way, right? What could she have possibly have done that would have repaired that? Nothing. I racked my brain on it, and I couldn't think of a single thing that would have made me feel better. But if I'm being honest, when we were talking last night, there was still a shred of hope. I was still willing to listen. All I needed was a little bit of regret, little bit of accountability. And I would have said, okay, last try, last chance. I'm willing. Didn't even get that. So, when it get to the end of the evening, nope, she asked, what's the rules of contact? I said, listen, you ever need me, fine, reach out. I'll never fully abandon you. I don't have that in me. But I think our contact should be minimal. Again, I'm not in the friend zone. I'm not a friend zone person. I don't have that in me either. Not with the history. That's asking for too much. You are not going to have your cake and eat it too. If it's only us when it's convenient for you and the rest of the time it's all about you, you can keep that to yourself. I'm done with that. I'm over it. I've had enough of that. And it's bullshit. It really is what they say. You open up, they say, oh, I want you to be open. I want you to be emotionally intelligent. Bullshit, because the minute you open your mouth, it's immediately used against you. Immediately. Hell, not only was it used against me, but I gave her the damn blueprint how to do it the worst way fucking possible. And that is exactly how she chose to do it. And I didn't lose my cool. I didn't give a reaction. Like I said, that snort was about the most of the reaction she got from me at all. I was again, I was friendly and we were even cracking a joke at one point. We decided to have the fire, to sit around and talk around the fire. and I couldn't get it, started. Like, well, the fire starter started up, but it didn't catch. So she said, "Well, hey, let me try to get it going." I'm like, okay. And after a couple minutes of her trying, it wasn't working either. Same thing. Embers would start, but as soon as you took the flame away, it went out. I said, there's a metaphor here in this. And, I walked away and I made another fire starter. I make my fire starters, I have my family collect for me empty toilet paper rolls for the cardboard, and then I stuff them full of dryer lint. When you clean out the um, screen on the dryer, every time you use it, or you should. And at least once a year, better to do it twice. Take a lint lizard or something and go through it, because I'm not kidding. It'll not only will it suck your energy, cause your electric bill to go up because your dryer isn't running as efficiently as it can, but it's also a fire hazard. So, PSA, public service announcement. Be aware of that. Anyway, so I made another fire starter. I went out and finally it did start. And again, in that moment, I was genuinely like lighthearted, like I was wide open. I did let my guard down in that moment because it was bittersweet. It was, hey, it feels just like old times again. Made me think of our second date. But again, as the night progressed, and the music had a factor too. 3 songs showed up last night. The first one was when she was on the drive. It was from a band I've been listening to lately, but it was a song I hadn't heard. It's a good song. I played that for At one point, we took a break in the conversation, so I played some music, because that was something else we used to do together. Show each other new music. So it was an upbeat song. It was pretty cool. Excuse me. So I played that, and then a little later, I was letting the playlist go random. Like I wasn't, telling it what song to play next. I was letting it go. And again, same thing. Brought up the same band, but it was like a love ballad. I'm like, it's not usually their style, but it played whatever. Then the last song, it was still on random. I've been listening to a lot of these like country AI things. Like I like some of them. They got a good sound to them. I'm 50-50. I'm iffy on the AI thing, but I listen to what I like. And it was one I hadn't heard before, and it was along the lines of, I'm you wanted a monster, this is what you made me, was the gist of the song. I'm like, damn, that was appropriate. I had to protect myself. I had to put my walls up. I know I was very cold. And again, it wasn't like on purpose out of vengeance. It was I was protecting myself. Like I said it. The last time we went through this cycle, I said, you are not going to do this to me again. And she moved in a way that she did it again. And I held true. I really wanted it to be her. And I think she was really hoping last night that, she waited long enough that I was, going to let time, do its thing. And it didn't work that way. This was one of the ones you should have been here before. We could have avoided all this. Going back to the rings, it was funny at one point in our discussion, she asked if I had ever opened the box, to look at to look at them. I said, no, I didn't, because I put them back in the box with stuff for her to take, you know. Um, so she said, I'd really like you to keep a hold of them, you to have them. I said, okay, fine. So, she fished them out, and I did look, because I took the hint, and there was a little note in there, and I'm not going to get, part of it was very short and sweet, but my response was, my very first thought, instinctual, to the little note was, I wish that were true, because if it was, we wouldn't be where we're at now. It wasn't always. It was when it was convenient. It was when you felt like it. And again, I'm done with. I just turned 45 years old. I'm not a kid anymore. It's time to take life seriously. We're not in high school. I'm done with the games. That and that's all this was straight up mind games. And you know, I constantly had to prove that I was willing to fight for her. But the one time I asked for, I didn't even actually come out swinging that hard. I just asked for a fraction of reciprocation, and that was too much. That was too much to ask for. And that right there told me everything I needed to know about where I stood, because I don't trust words anymore. I trust actions. And again, your actions were very deliberate. You were informed. You were very conscientious. You knew what had happened to me in the past. You knew it was going to hurt me. And you knew there would be consequences if you did it. I was very clear on all that. And she chose to not listen to any of it. Her choice. She chose to tune me out, to again be disrespectful, refuse to hear the sound of my voice. At one point I said, we were talking about another situation with another, and I'm really surprised that it went the way it did, because again, I gave her every chance to save it. Like, we were talking about another friend of mine that had gotten himself in some trouble, and again, I'm not gonna, go too far into it, but I said, I was one of the last ones that was still talking to him after, the news came out. I said I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, because that's who I am. But, our last conversation, the last time he was here, he had no remorse and no accountability. It was all about him. He was worried. He was trying to get out of the consequences for the choices that he made. And I'm sorry, I cannot get down with that. I have never in my life gotten away with anything consequence free, even little shit. That's not my lot in life. I think that's, a big part of, my sense of justice, because I've never been allowed to get away with shit. Hell, I'm in trouble for shit I didn't even do, and there's evidence to that, by the way. And I'm getting ready to start that fight soon too, because I'm getting tired of a lot of shit. Anyway, not related. Yeah, I'm reclaiming my life. And it's my turn, because nobody else was going to do, she was never going to do right by me. I had to do right by myself. I begged, I pleaded, I gave her instructions, I told her how to do it. I told her how to save it back as soon as I knew it was coming. I really did everything I could to stop that from happening. And that's why I can, as much as I hate the ending and I think it sucks, I'm standing by it. Because again, there was not a genuine apology there. And again, I really don't even think she fully understood. the damage that it did. And that's probably for the better. But again, I really got the hint. It wasn't remorse. She was upset and she was trying to see if she could get back in to finish the job. That was the vibe I was getting. Because again, there wasn't a genuine apology in that whole. I gave it every chance, every opportunity. So, um, that's the end of that chapter. I'm very dead serious about what I said in my, Breaking Free series the other day. Got to be someone of principles. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I knew, if there was that remorse, if there was accountability, then I was willing to give it a chance to see if there would be change. I was willing to go out on the line one more time. But it wasn't there. I saw what I needed to see. She wanted me on the line still. Again, didn't want to commit to me, but wanted me committed so I wasn't going nowhere. Wanted me to sweep things under the rug, like, oh no, this never happened. Just like the very first time, after the first heart attack, when I had to beg for a month and never got an apology for that either. Not a genuine one. Or the second or the third time that she did the same shit. And I knew, again, that remorse, it wasn't there. And if I forgave her, it would happen again, and it would continue to escalate. The next time would be even worse. Again, she had to come back and try to finish the job. Yeah, you should have did it. Your first shot. You grazed me. You got me good. But it wasn't enough. And you'll never get the chance again. She said she would probably, block me on social media because she said it hurt to see me, online when she's had me, the shadow thing on so I can't see when she, just like before when she said, oh, I don't watch your stuff, but she quoted it like 3 times. She likes to tell on herself. So I'm sure she won't see this immediately, but I'm positive she'll see it eventually. And yeah, that's the side of, the story you didn't want to listen to when I was trying to stop it. Because it wasn't my choice. That was going to take both of us. I was all in, you were half out. Hell, more than half. Freaking 99%. Anyway, this thing is super long. I'm sure hardly anyone will watch it except for, her or the Flying Monkeys. I don't even know why I bothered. I figured if anyone out there was curious, how the story ends. Here you go. Here it is. And I did leave the door open again because one of the very first things in the conversation was, I'm probably moving within a year. And again, that last conversation, that last face to face, when she told me she was unhappy, I was laying out my 2-year plan. And again, she moved how she chose to move. Because again, she didn't want what it was from me. She made that very clear. She wanted that, but she didn't want it from me. I was done being a, you know, afterthought. I never expected to be top priority, but I expected to be a priority. And I was never going to get that. I would always be the last thing on the list, if ever even considered. Most time I didn't even make the list, let alone the bottom of it. And that's the reality. That's the truth. That's what I had to see. Again, if I had caved, it wasn't going to get better. It was going to happen again, and it was going to get worse. And I'm done. I told her before she went, I am breaking this cycle one way or another. I put the ball in her court. She could have made the choice to break the cycle the right way. But again, she did me a favor. And I think that kind of hurt too, because she made a comment at one point, that I was looking a lot better. And again, kind of, to quote Stephen King, one of my favorite Stephen King quotes, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. I came this close to dying. But now that's over. I'm free of that. So now it's time to live. And I am taking better care of myself. Because again, nobody else was going to. Not a pity party, just an acceptance of reality. I'm not giving up. I'm sure there's someone out there. And when the time is right, we'll meet each other. That's the great thing about it. She didn't get to see much of it. But that part of me, it's still there. I'm still capable. Try as she might, she didn't kill that. I still have the heart I always had. I'm just much more protective of it now. Now it's not for everybody. Now you gotta earn this shit. That whole 80-20 theory was true. Because I know I was lacking. I don't know where I was lacking. But it was at 20%. Wanted to go chase material things. And that's why it was never going to work. Alright, this is super long. I could ramble some more, but I'm not going to. I've said enough, and that's it. Now I'm done. I can move on. To those that have been upset with the way I've been on social media lately, I do genuinely apologize. I did have to get it out of my system, and now it is. Now I'm finally ready to take those steps. I'm moving on. So, feel free to correct me if I start to step out. Bad habits come in, because I got to start all over again. I got to teach myself new good habits. Please do correct me. I'm finally ready to It's not mine to hold on to anymore. And I need to quit punishing myself for something that, wasn't, again, that was my whole complaint. I kept getting stuck in the consequences of choices she made with no regard to me, with no consideration of my input, how I would feel about it. Like, and that's not just negatively. There were times I could have enhanced. I could have, and she even said like, "Oh, that was a good idea. I wish we had talked about it." Yeah, I bet you do. I proved that time and time again. I've only ever met one woman in my life that hasn't, at the very least, considered switching up on a man, like that I know of. Like, I have no interpersonal, that includes relatives. Everyone that I thought of, I found an example. Um, I've only met one woman in my life that did not in some way monkey branch in their lifetime. And that person is long gone. They don't make them like her no more. So people can say, for all the hate against the men lately, I've sat here and fucking taken it like how bad men are. No. Face reality. And I understand I'm a little bitter and I'm a little hurt, but I also have to look at the evidence, at the facts. I'm not giving up hope because, again, I have hope that I'll meet the right one sometime. No, I don't think every woman is like that, but I think enough of the majority is. And I'm waiting for one to prove me wrong. I welcome it. I would love to be proven wrong on that. Nothing of loyalty. No comprehension whatsoever. It's ironic, the phrase ride or die. And she definitely tried to get me to die. She tried real hard. Failed. Still here. Still standing. Still able to do what I was doing before. Hell, even better than I did it before. All it did was correct me. Make me not so naive. Make me more protective of myself. Learn, different behavior patterns. Learn what to look for. Because again, I have yet to have an adult relationship that I have not been cheated on in some way, shape, or fashion. That I have not been stepped out on. That I have not been, expected to accept the unacceptable. To just tolerate it. And that's not just, because again, I do consider this like, hey, if everyone you've been through, this has been the problem. Maybe it's you. Trust me, I've considered that. But no, my problem is I allow it. That's my accountability in it. I see the red flags and I want to wish, I want so bad to see the best in everybody, and some people that just have no good in them. I learned that the hard way. As much as I wish and hope. It's a shame. Not the way I wanted it, but it is what it is, right? Anyway, this thing's about to be an hour long, so I'm going to cut it off now. I know I keep rambling. I'm sorry. please let my words be a warning. Save yourself from going through what I get through. Learn the lesson the easy way. I know that's not the way life is designed to be, but I try to help where I can. So if I can spare somebody else, then by all means, it's worth it for me to sit here and pour everything out. Put myself on full display. It's worth it if I help one person, and I know already. I have confirmation that there is, a couple out there that are listening. So I'll keep doing it. Here to make change. I want things different, both in myself and in the world. And it's not going to get different until I do different. I have to break cycles. I have to stop repeating patterns. I have to let go of the things that, are hurting me. And that's all strictly survival. Again, I wasn't even given a choice. This is the corner I was backed into. And this is the monster I had to become to get through it. That's why I was so angry for so long. I do not like feeling like that. I do not like succumbing to that feeling. It's been a long time since I did it. And again, that's the accountability, because I let go. I lost control of that. I let that creep in. But I promise I won't make that mistake again. And again, that's not saying I'm going to shut everybody out, because I learned my lesson. But I ain't for everybody. And if you don't come correct, you don't get access. That simple. You don't got to be perfect. You just got to be willing to listen and wanting to grow. That's it. Again, I keep it super simple. If you can't take accountability, you'll never grow. And you can't be around me. I was that person for a long time. And I will not go back to that again. I need better company than that. Alright, everybody take care. I won't give the usual ending because this isn't part of that series, but hopefully it helps somebody. But y'all take care.